Welcome back to our Gospels in a Year. Why don't you leave some kind of comment about where you're up to? Are you keeping up? We are at we're getting to about chapter 19 of Luke, and you might be up there, you might be past there, you might be back going round again. You're up to the second lot of the Gospels in a year, and that would be very, very cool. Remember, the reason why we're doing this is because Jesus, at the end of the day, is not just the center of our life, he's the center of our belief system, he's the center of our scriptures, he's the center of our faith and who we are. So it's the challenge is let's spend a year getting to know him and who he is. And so that we make sure that when we're reading the rest of scripture, we're reading it through the lens of Jesus. When we're living our life and making decisions, we're doing it through the lens of Jesus. And so, as I said, we're up to the book of Luke, and we are now transitioning from the second part of Luke, which was Jesus's journey through to Jerusalem, and then the third part, which is the death and resurrection of Jesus, Jesus in Jerusalem. So I'm going to transition into that space. But before I do, last week we kind of overlooked or stepped over Zacchaeus. So I just want to talk about Zacchaeus quickly, and I think it'll be interesting. Zacchaeus, Luke chapter 19. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, apparently, but he's the guy that was the tax collector, but really had this thing within him. He had to see Jesus, so he climbs up a sycamore tree, and Jesus sees him and calls him down and says, "I must have dinner with this guy." And after spending dinner with Jesus, Zacchaeus comes out and says, "Everybody who I've ripped off, I'm going to reconcile with. And in fact, I'm going to give you more than I've ripped you off. For everybody, and I'm going to make sure from now on, I'm not ripping anybody off. But I'm going to give money to the poor, and I'm going to give money back to those who I've ripped off." And Jesus makes this incredible statement. He says, "Today, salvation has come to this house, for I've come to seek and save the lost." I think that's an interesting statement. Today, salvation has come to this house. Imagine, if you will, that I'm preaching up the front on a Sunday, and somebody says, "Hey, I've decided I'm going to be generous today." And I go, "Awesome, salvation has come to this house. You are now saved." I think I might get in trouble, but yet Jesus did it, and Jesus is allowed to do it. So I guess the question is why? Why did Jesus say it? What did he mean by it? And do we need to tweak some of our thinking around this space and place? Because I think maybe we do. And I reckon that this place that we've got to start the wrestle, the place we've got to start the reimagining, the place we've got to start the relearning might be the answer to this question. What does it mean to be saved? What does salvation mean to you? What does salvation mean to me? And I reckon that's a great question to ask. So the word salvation is sozo, S-O-Z-O, and it basically means to be restored, to be made well, to be set free, to be delivered from, to be saved, if you like. But if the answer to your question is saved or salvation means that I have been, that saved means I've been saved from hell so I can go to heaven when I die, I actually think this creates some problems for us in this story of Zacchaeus. Because if I was to say, as I said, that your eternal future is being secured because you decided to give more money to people, that might be a challenge for some of our theology. But if salvation means to be made well, to be restored, to be made whole, to be delivered, then all of a sudden this might make more sense. So if Zacchaeus was, and apparently he was a tax collector is essentially an ancient, what we would think of in the modern day as a gangster. Basically what would happen is the ruler would go, "I need $1 million in taxes," and then that would start to be a bidding war. And Josh goes, I'll go collect the taxes, but I won't just bring you $1 million, I'll bring you 1.2. And I go, no, I'll bring you 1.3. And then at some point they settle, and Zacchaeus goes, no, I'm going to bring 1.7, and no one else, we're not willing to go higher than that. So Zacchaeus's job now is to go and collect $1.7 million for the ruler. But if he collects $2 million, he gets to keep the 0.3, right? If he gets $3 million, he can keep the 1.3. So Zacchaeus's idea, Zacchaeus's job, the way he makes money, the way he does life, is by trying to get as much money as he can from his own people to supply the enemy with resource. And that is a crazy, crazy job description. So the tax collector would do anything. So if you owed tax and you couldn't pay it, he's there at 6 a.m. in the morning with a baseball bat, taking out your kneecaps, making sure you pay your money. It is all about, number one, it's corruption. Number two, it's greed. Number three, it's all about me. I don't care who I stand on as long as I get me and mine. And so when Zacchaeus goes, I'm actually, you know what? After spending time with Jesus, I'm going to give money to the poor and I'm not going to rip anybody off ever again. And in fact, I'm going to restore that and reconcile that and give extra to that. And Jesus goes, you know what? Salvation has come to this house. Why? Because he has been saved. He's been saved from corruption. He's been saved from greed. He's been saved from this kind of selfish, egotistical idolizing. He's been saved from his narcissism. He's been saved from that which was holding him bondage in life. In fact, another way we could say it would be like, I might go, oh, you know what? I love my drugs. I'm on drugs. I have drugs. And then I spend time with Jesus and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Jesus has motivated me. Jesus has saved me through the power of the risen Christ. I'm giving up drugs. And you go, wow, salvation has come to this house. You have been saved from that which has held you bondage. You've been saved from that which has held you back. You've been saved from that which is keeping you out of life to the full, out of the kingdom of heaven. And you can now live and become everything God has created you to be. Isn't that an incredible definition of salvation? It's not just about, am I saved so I can go to heaven when I die, but can I be saved right now so that I can live heaven on earth today and every day? Can I be saved from the hell in which I'm living in? Can I be saved from that which has got me chained and bound and miserable? And I think that is phenomenal. So the question then would be, what does saved mean to you? What does salvation mean to you? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I know as a Pentecostal, as a Christian, as a evangelical, we get asked a lot, when were you saved? Maybe the answer should be, well, saved from what? Because I can tell you, look, when I was 19, God did an amazing thing with me. One encounter with Jesus, and I was saved from so many addictions. Probably can't count them on one hand, and it was incredible. And they no longer had me bound. They no longer were keeping me in this space of guilt and shame and whatever else. But there's been other things as we go along, other salvations that I've been saved from, I guess. When I was 25 and I had this experience, Pastor Reggie Dabbs was preaching, and I was at a Planet Shakers conference at the start of January, and I can remember it clearly that he preached this message, and all of a sudden I had this unbelievable revelation, if you like, of the love of God. And so at that day, I was saved from the idea that God was like this taskmaster that was sitting up there with a lightning bolt ready to strike you every time you did wrong. I was saved from this unbelievably corrupt version of God that was actually holding me back from the love of God. So all through my life, even just recently, constantly, what are we being saved? So what does being saved mean to you? What does salvation mean to you? I reckon that's a great question, but it probably then bleeds into the next question. It says, I've came to seek and save the lost. So maybe another question might be, if we know what saved means, then what does lost mean? In this particular case, Zacchaeus was lost. And it wasn't just that he was lost in the sense of he was on his way to heaven and got lost and ended up in hell. That's not what Jesus is clearly saying. What he's saying is he was living a life lost, purposeless, without vision, he was heading in the wrong, he didn't even know where he was. He didn't know where he was at. I think that's a really great thing too, because lost infers it was unintentional. Lost infers that it was just woke up one day. It wasn't that he set out to be an evil person. He just one day realized, when he met Jesus, he realized how lost he had been. When we go to reach lost people, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to get them to heaven when they die? And that's a great thing. Please don't misunderstand me. That's awesome. But are we trying to get them to heaven when they die? Or are we trying to bring salvation to their house? Are we trying to let the work of Christ move in and through them as they do their life, so that which is holding them back, that which is holding them bound, that which is keeping them from life to the full, that which is keeping them out of the kingdom of heaven, can be set free and saved from that. And so in that context, Jesus then goes on and we get to the triumphal entry. So let's just talk about that very, very quickly, and then we'll move on to part 3 next week. So the triumphal entry is an interesting thing, because Jesus goes to his fellas, hey, can you go to this place, and they're going to say this, and you're going to do that, and they're going to say this, and then just take the donkey, and I'm going to ride this donkey into town. And that's really important, because we'll talk about it in next week or the week after, because a similar thing happens when they're looking for a room to have the Passover in, and that's just interesting in and of itself. But really, the idea of Jesus riding in on a donkey is fascinating. We talked in one of the other Gospels about how at the same time Pontius Pilate would have been riding in on a war horse with an army, but Jesus is riding in on a donkey. And that's to fulfill the messianic prophecies for sure, found in Zechariah 9 and other places, that the Messiah was going to enter into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. But I think it's more than that. I think it's actually communicating to the people what his kingdom looks like. You see, the Empire of Rome looks like a war horse and military might. It looks one way, but the kingdom of heaven looks like humility. It looks like riding on a donkey. One thing I didn't mention though when we're talking about that is that very fact. This is actually, it's kind of like, for those who hadn't got it yet, Jesus was formally declaring himself as the Messiah. There is no doubt that this was not intentional. And that's part of why it's interesting when Jesus says, go talk to this person and follow that guy and say this and do this. Because it was obviously pre-planned. It was part of the story, part of the narrative that Jesus is the Messiah. And as he's riding in on this, is it Palm Sunday, he is declaring himself the Messiah. That's why it's interesting when you go to Jerusalem now, it's actually called the Via Dolorosa, the Passion Road, that it starts off with Jesus entering into Jerusalem on a donkey. And obviously the crowd go wild, the crowd go nuts. This is awesome. Our Messiah has arrived. The problem is, of course, is that the religious leaders are not happy about it at all. You've got the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, you've got the rich, you've got the powerful, you've got the Romans, you've got the soldiers, and in that context, they're not happy. So you've got this tension building between the Romans, the religiously elite, and then Jesus and his kingdom. And that is what the triumphal entry is trying to communicate, and it's what Luke is going to speak into as we move into part 3. So with that being said, we are going to leave it there. My question would be, what is it that you need to be saved from? And you go, I am saved. No, remember, be made well, be restored, be made whole. Is there something holding us back that is preventing us living in the kingdom of heaven right now? Are there things that we're still bound by that we need Jesus to interrupt and interact and change and bring salvation in? You know, maybe we're lost, but maybe it's not intentional. We just woke up one day and found ourselves in that space and place. Can I encourage you, don't feel condemned, don't feel chastised, don't feel any of those things. Just allow Jesus to bring his salvation power into that space. Make sure you're part of a community, part of a My 5, that you've got people around you that can help you in that space. And I reckon that would be very, very cool if we could see salvation come to our houses. And then, why? All because of the triumphal entry. Jesus is going to go in, he's going to come and defeat sin, defeat death, defeat it all, and so that we can live in the resurrection power. Anyway, all very, very cool. Don't want to jump ahead. Next week's part 3. Love you. Bye-bye.